Nobody.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Welcome to another edition of the Running Through the Jungles podcast. It's your boy Justin Lacey here. We got Tim Lyons. So Brandon is actually on vacation, a much deserved vacation.
Well,
So
that's
he's going to
questionable.
be, man, he's okay, maybe not so deserving on your side, but I'm a fan of, look, if you work hard and you work a lot as much as he do, you deserve to kind of chill out on the beach a little bit. So
Yeah.
Brandon, this episode's for you. We shouted out to you on this first beginning of this episode. So thank you so much, guys, for joining us. If you are in our live stream, we are just now going live. So sorry that we took a little bit of the delay in time to get this going, but we are hope to get your participation through this particular episode because we got a fun one bubbling up for you. So, but before we get into all of that, Tim, how you doing right now?
I'm doing good. I'm sorry, guys, we're late. That was kind of my fault. I was doing 500,000 different things, and usually I'm early as hell. But tonight I was just like I was trying to eat dinner and feed the dog and do all this other stuff, and life comes at me, and I'm like, okay, I got to take care of this. And my wife's like, honey, you got 1 minute until you got your show starts. I was like, oh, I'm going to be late. Oh, crap. So here we are, but I'm doing great. Happy hump day. We're halfway through the week, and the weekend's almost here. Time to play.
Yes, sir. And you know what? I knew we was going to be late too. So it's like, I mean, I wanted to make sure that we came prepared, ready to kind of hit hard through the fun segment of the show. So we got our man Austin R. He's always a loyal listener and great follower of the show. How you doing, my
Thank you.
brother Austin, man? Thank you so much for joining us as you always do. And for these upcoming segments here, again, we know you ain't no stranger to the comment section. So definitely please, participate. And I will tee all this stuff up for you as well, too. We got a man Ken in the comments as well, too. Who they, my brother? How you doing? Glad to see
Welcome.
that you're on the air today as well, too. Well, you're live, I should say. I'm telling you, man, this is going to be that kind of episode, man. Just getting us through the week. We're just happy. So we got a number of things to talk about. But the number one fun thing we're going to talk about, man, is that we got our all-time Bengals list that Tim and I are going to share with you all today. This is going to be a fun conversation that we hope. And we would love to hear you all participate, when we get to that segment. So there's going to be some things that we'll agree about. There's going to be some things that we're not going to agree about. But I think that while we're in this team building phase of the offseason, mandatory minicamp is underway. Let's just talk about our teams, what we appreciated with this Bengals team so far throughout the product that they put on the field for how many years of existence? 57 years? The Bengals been in existence for 57 years, right?
57. Yeah, I think 57 or 58. I can't remember how many it's been. I don't know. I lose count.
I feel like that we've been around since like the 1900s for some reason, but
Yeah.
we're not. Paul
Yeah.
Brown has,
All
So,
Brown has, yeah.
all right, but like I said, we got a number of things to discuss today. But I think that this right here, I mean, we got a number of things that just happened over the course of the last few days. I mean, mandatory minicamp is underway.
Mhm.
Yeah, we got a couple of comments that was made that came through the whole Bengals Twitter world or whatever you want to call it. I'm trying to leave social media out of these shows because I feel like that half the shows that we hear, if you're podcast listeners, if you're listening to stuff on YouTube, social media is obviously the brain trust with a lot of this stuff when it comes to getting news quickly around the league. But I don't like relying on that. And I don't like relying on the
Yeah.
fan engagement or the farming engagement of the fan base or the opponents, just haters. I don't like relying on social media because
Yeah.
I just want to be able to speak fruitful for my thought. But I think that it's a nice little landing point to talk about OTAs with this subject matter. Load management for Joe Burrow. So yesterday it was reported that Joe Burrow missed the start of minicamp. And the reasoning for that, which I'm gonna be honest, I didn't think nothing of this. I just wasn't
I
gonna
didn't
worry
either.
myself sick with it. Tim, I know you're not either. I know you're gonna give a little bit of comment as well too.
Mhm.
He just missed it. It was just a day off. It was a scheduled day off, as what Zach Taylor stated. He stated that they give Joe Burrow a day off once a week, which is good. I feel
Mhm.
like that is a great way to kind of prepare him for what this season is going to bring.
Yep.
He works really hard throughout the offseason, Joe Burrow, as I'm talking about. He pushes himself to the limit, and it's one of those things where you saw what happened last year with this calf strain, And that
Mhm.
really ruined a lot of opportunities early on during the season and even midway during the season when we was finally getting ourselves together, that it never really we never really caught our groove. And it just kind of set a bad omen for how the season was going to start. And we don't want that. And
Yeah.
we want our guy fresh. We want our guy healthy. Injuries are unpredictable throughout the course of the season. You can't predict them all the time. They happen so egregiously often with players around the league. Last year was just a bad league all the way around.
Yeah.
But the load management conversation for Joe Burrow, Tim, how you feel about this? I'm actually okay with it.
Like I said at the sorry, I got bugs flying out. I'm outside, as you guys can see the beautiful Pacific Northwest behind me. So like I said at the beginning of when Joe Burrow returned back and he was throwing, he said in his press conference that he was going to take his time. He was going to rest. You know, if he was sore or whatever, or just needed a break, he was going to take those breaks. He wasn't going to overdo himself. So when this news came out yesterday, as a Bengals fan, I didn't. As a we'll put it this way, as a running through the jungle co-host, I didn't freak out. I was like, "Oh, he's taking a day off. Who whoop de doo da." And I know the rest of the Bengals nation and Who Dey Nation and win Cincinnati. Everybody, everybody freaked out. It was all over the internet. Everybody was freaking out, and it was just
Mhm.
this big old news. And I'm just like, he's taking a day off. He has been there since he could come into the building. He's been working out with Jamar Chase. He was there at the beginning of OTAs and training. And then the rookie training camps he was there. Just relax. It's Joe
Yeah.
Burrow taking a day off. Zach Taylor said, "Hey Joe, you're going to take a day off today." Zach Taylor even admitted and said, "Oh, I thought the media was going to be here um, tomorrow or the day before, or whatever, and you guys showed up today." Well, sorry, Joe's on. He's taking time off today, so you know, I don't know. You got to give the man some slack. I know that we're in this whole precautionary mode of what happened last year. Joe got hurt in, June, July, excuse me, and then his calf injury happened, and then we know what happened the rest of the season. I'm not going to repeat it. And I know a lot of fans are skeptical of, is Joe hurt again, and all this stuff. Just take a deep breath, everybody. We all know what the news is. He took a day off. He gets a day off every week. So to me, it wasn't a big deal. I didn't overreact. I wasn't like, oh no, what happened to Joe? Is he hurt again? Or this or that. So just take a deep breath. You know, just just go drink a beer, relax. Everybody will be okay.
You know what? It just kind of just goes back to thinking like the reason why this is such a huge topic right now is because us fans make it a topic.
Yeah.
It's we're so much built up with all this angst that we just want Joe Burrow to have a healthy offseason. And if the slightest thing just goes wrong, if a pin dropped the wrong way, we automatically just assume, oh, feel sorry for us or feel sorry for Joe. He hasn't had a normal offseason since he's came in the league. Well, that has been a problem for him. But at the end of the day, he has soldiered up and dealt with it, whatever adversity came his way. That's his form of adversity in the NFL,
Yeah.
of having the most normalist of off seasons like most players would. It
Yeah.
happened. You know what? Do we like it? No. But would you rather take that, or would you rather take the off seasons of always constantly changing your head coaches once every other 2 years or so? Justin Herbert,
Hmm.
third head coach, by
Yep.
the way. They came out in the same draft class. Tua Tagovailoa, he's, I believe, on his second head coach. Mike
Yeah.
McDaniel, it was hired right after Brian Flores. So that's number two. And yet we still don't know if that's going to work itself out in the long run or not.
Hmm.
Jalen Hurts still has Nick Sirianni, so that's not to be. But he was playing behind Carson Wentz, and that was
Right.
a dumpster fire with Doug Peterson before that even became what it was. So there's a lot of adversity that a lot of players have to go through throughout the season. It's not a perfect world all the time. You do the best you possibly can, and
Hmm.
and then when the time the season rolls around, you got to be able to throw your gloves on, throw your helmet on, strap up, and let's go. So
Yeah.
I don't take too much into account for, but I just wish that us fans can, like you just said, take a collective exhale of just, hey, everything's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's a process to this. Is him getting hurt starting to kind of get to you a bit? Sure, it could.
Mm-hmm.
But Joe Burrow, I think that we need to reiterate this point. He's not injury prone.
Right.
He had a couple of injuries that was catastrophic to his NFL career, but he's
Mm-hmm.
fought through them.
Yeah.
Look how he's practicing in just regular OTAs. He
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be throwing if that wasn't the case. He will be
Right.
sitting out much sooner. He will be like, "Oh, I'm in attendance, but I'm not practicing. I'm just here to spectate a little bit." But
Mm-hmm.
he's playing with these guys. He's rocking with them. He's coaching them up. He's throwing. He's his mental focus. His mental capacity is sharp as ever, and
Mm-hmm.
he's preparing himself for the long grind of what we believe is going to be a deep, hopeful Super Bowl run this upcoming year. So
Yeah.
I'm not look. This is going to be the last time we talk about this for the time being until something really does happen. But on to
Well,
bigger and better things before we even get to it, because this next topic is going to kind of be a little bit of a head scratcher. But before I get into it, for those that has been joining with us, awful, please, I forgot. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel.
yes.
Click that thumbs up. They ding that notification bell so that way you'll know we go live again. My mistake. We were both kind of late trying to prepare for what we were going to talk about later on during this show, because we are going to talk about our top 5 favorite / best Bengals teams of all time, and we want your engagement when that happens.
Yeah.
So we're going to have we're going to have fun conversation throughout this whole entire off season before the season leads up. So, but in other news, and I can't believe we're actually talking about this yet again on a Bengals show that's echoed throughout all of Bengals media. But it's worth noting that Justin Jefferson literally broke the bank.
Yeah.
He killed it. He crushed it. Kudos to his agent. I don't know who his agent is. I'm sure it was already reported of who negotiated that deal. But a 4-year, $140 million contract, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong on that number.
I,
Um,
I don't remember what the
5 year,
stats are exact. I know I think he got a guaranteed 110 mil, whatever that
110
was.
million. Yes.
Yeah.
So
So,
that landed to about 35 million a year
yeah.
for a annual value. He's the
Mm-hmm.
highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL, and tip the
Mm-hmm.
cap to him, man. He deserves it.
He
Offensive
does.
Player of the Year in 2022. He should have been a Rookie of the Year in 2020. I'm sorry,
Right.
Justin Herbert never should have gotten that award. Burrow would have. You could have made an argument if Burrow didn't get hurt with that knee injury, he would have won an award, because again, it
Yeah.
was one of those things where he was kind of cooking before that
Yeah.
injury happened. But Justin Jefferson was lighting it up on fire. But you know how these prestigious awards kind of go. They're quarterback driven, they're media driven. And Justin Jefferson had to outperform all of that narrative to be able to win a prestigious award himself, which is the Offensive Player of the Year
Yeah.
in 2022. And 4-time Pro Bowler. He's made the Pro Bowl every year he's been in the league so far, and I don't see that number stopping anytime soon. And he's had to deal with some adversity himself, being with the Minnesota Vikings. Kirk Cousins is no longer there now. He had to deal with injuries, losing him last year to an injury, but also he had to play with guys like Jaron Hall or something like that. But we most notably know Nick Mullins.
Mm-hmm.
What's his name?
He
The
had
bald guy.
oh
Josh
my God.
Dobbs.
Dobbs. Yeah.
Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs. That experiment was
Yeah.
actually pretty good at first, and then it failed.
Yeah. It did. It started great, and then it just ended. And then I think he
Yeah.
ended up with the Cardinals after that, didn't he?
He did. I don't know where
Somewhere.
he's at. I don't know where he's at now, but
I don't
I'm
know either.
hoping that he's a solid backup. He's a guy that, hey,
Yeah.
look, if the Bengals were to sign him to a backup quarterback, and I know everybody's happy with Jake Browning, but if Josh Dobbs was our backup quarterback, you wouldn't be mad about that now, would you? I mean,
No.
QB3 I would be happy with QB3, best case scenario.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, with the way Jake played last year, I'm happy with him as our backup. But if Dobbs would probably, like you said, QB3. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
But if we had Justin Jefferson, The raging debate always that's another thing that kept on forming on Twitter so much.
all the
The
time.
trade to Bengals traded for Justin Jefferson because they admits that he didn't want to commit to a long-term deal with Minnesota. It
Yep.
was just it just pushed this whole entire fan base agenda because we wanted to reunite and reinvigorate the 2019 LSU Tigers.
That would
Guys,
be, and that would be the silliest, craziest thing on earth if Jay Jetta came over here to Cincinnati with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. And I swear, like when before the draft, it was, the possibilities of Jefferson being traded to the Bengals and all that. And then after the draft, during this whole before the contract was signed, you started seeing this stuff showing up on Twitter and Facebook and stuff. Oh, what the Bengals could do to trade for Justin Jefferson and all. I'm like, man, stop that nonsense. Justin Jefferson wasn't going nowhere. I knew they were going to end up getting that deal done. Justin Jefferson deserves that deal.
mm-hmm.
And you know what? I just believe, and I know you haven't asked my opinion yet on what the Bengals and Jamar Chase is going to do, but I think we were waiting for that deal to get done to sign
For
Jamar
sure.
Chase, to extend Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is going to get similar to that deal plus 1.2, 1.3 million, whatever. His guarantees might not be the same because it all depends on what Jamar wants. Does he want the big guarantees?
Mm-hmm.
Does he want it, or does he want X, Y, and Z? But he's still making, 0.5 million more than Justin Jefferson or something, because there is that teammate, competitiveness between them two because they're friends. They're all friends,
Right, right,
so
for sure.
I just think if the Bengals were not it, if they weren't smart to get Justin or to get Jamar Chase's contract done, either before preseason or sometime between now and before preseason happens, and they drag their feet on this contract, that would worry me. But just like we've seen in the years past, Carson Palmer had Ocho Cinco, Andy Dalton had AJ Green. I don't see them letting Jamar Chase go. Joe
Hell no.
Burrow and Jamar Chase are like peanut butter and jelly. You
Right.
can't let that go. So, we'll see it. I believe we'll see a contract done. I
Yeah.
won't say sometime
You
soon, but sometime.
Let's talk about that because
Mhm.
in fairness, you did bring it up, and I did forget to kind of like ask the second part of the Justin Jefferson because we're paying so much respect to Justin Jefferson and what he's brought to the NFL since he came in the league in 2020. But the
Yeah.
second part of that question, what does that do for Jamar Chase now? Well, it's simple. He now has leverage and tool in his back pocket that he can bring to the Bengals team, front
Yep.
office's representatives to let them know that hey, you see Jetta's deal, that's what I want. Add a
Yep.
dollar to it. I want to be the highest paid now. And Justin and Jamar Chase has the right to ask for that.
He
He may have
does.
been in the league 1 year shorter, and he didn't have his best year last year, but he was still very explosive. He still
But
was
look
a
what he
Pro Bowl
was
receiver.
But look what he was dealing with last year. He had Joe Burrow that was hobbling along on one leg, and then Jake Browning came in. Come on,
Yeah,
and Jamar Chase played his butt off, and still, he didn't have a great year, but he had a good year.
for
And
sure.
and Ken, you're absolutely right. That's why I mentioned the whole Carson Palmer and Ocho Cinco and Andy Dalton and AJ Green. So of course Jamar Chase and uh, and Joe Burrow. Those are we absolutely want to keep them. Like
Mhm.
what's one thing that I don't know how many shows you've watched of ours, Ken and Austin, but a couple shows, or actually quite a few shows ago, I said, I was watching Ocho and Shannon Sharp's show, Nightcap, and Ocho made the comment of the one thing the Cincinnati Bengals get right every draft is drafting wide receivers, and they know how to get their wide receivers. So we know we have the wide receiver with Jamar Chase. You know,
Mhm.
we got to keep them together. Peanut butter and jelly have to stay together, and that's all there is to it.
The thing that Jamar Chase brings to the offense that I've always stated, and the reason why I wanted to lean more Team Chase, more so than Team Sewell in 21 when we had that glorifying raging debate across it went national for a number of reasons. Everybody thought, and everybody named Mama basically just told us we need to just protect Burrow, get the weapons. I'm sorry, protect Burrow, fix your O-line, then go get a weapon later or something like that.
Mhm.
You can get Burrow a receiver later in draft. And to certain extents, that can be absolutely correct. But
Yeah.
however, in the rare situation when you truly believe in a guy, then you go out there and get him. And I think they made that they made that decision when they drafted Jamar Chase. They wanted to be more explosive. They chose to get him not because he paired up with Burrow and LSU. Sure, that's a part of the factor of it. But I've always stated this about Jamar, and it still rings true even to this day. Jamar Chase was the perfect receiver that came into what we already had talent wise at the position group: T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. If we're being honest with ourselves, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd was not enough to amplify the offense in the direction that we wanted. We saw it in Joe Burrow's rookie year. We were struggling to push the ball down the field no matter how good Burrow was playing. Guys
Right.
just wasn't getting open. People were able to cloud coverage and play man press coverage on guys on the outside. Now,
Yeah.
some of that was the attributed growth that T. Higgins hasn't taken that step yet, but he got there eventually. And
Mhm.
Tyler Boyd never really been a true number one his whole entire career, but there were shades where he was playing like it.
Mhm.
So, but to rely on just only that, it was not going to be a recipe of Super Bowl runs like we've made in the past in 2021. Until we got Jamar Chase. He was the perfect receiver to mix in what we already had to elevate the receiving room. And then Joe Burrow would then push them up and elevate the entire team. That's why Jamar Chase has the leverage in his ball court, is that he's not just a Joe Burrow merchant. He could literally go right down to South Beach in the Miami Dolphins and take over Tyreek Hill's position. Be like, all right, you guys can get rid of Tyreek now. I'm the true number one here. He's one of
Yeah.
those dynamic, explosive guys that you just have to pay him that bread. The Bengals
Mhm.
really got to get used to paying this big time money. They really do. So if they already messed up the whole thing with T. Higgins as far as like waiting this out the way that they did. I mean, they should have came up with a deal a year ago, but it didn't
Yeah.
happen. It was what it was. They were dealing with the Jesse Bates situation. Him and T. Higgins share the same agent, whatever. But I'm glad we're not
Mhm.
talking about T. Higgins and his contract for once.
Mhm.
It gets annoying.
We'll
But to
talk
give
about that. You know, what's funny is we'll talk about T. Higgins' contract in August
like so
when
much,
he
we'll
signs
talk
that
so much about this.
as soon as he signs that franchise tag in August, you know, we're not
That's
really
when we'll
worried
talk
about
more about it.
it.
Yeah.
That's when we'll talk about it. You know, T. Higgins, you know, like I said before, I love the guy. You know, I wish things could have been differently with his health and his soft tissue. But, you know, like we'll talk about him later. I ain't going to go into the depth anymore.
Yeah, and the Bengals have built a nice pipeline now with by drafting a guy like Jamar Chase to now he can be the standard setter
Hmm.
of what's to come next and how to prepare as a true Bengals alpha at the receiving room now.
Yeah.
Coming in his first year, he was just one of the guys. Now you're
Hmm.
looking at him as the guy. And I
Yeah.
think that that's imperative to his development and why he is going to get this big contract. He
Yeah.
deserved that big contract. The Bengals front office said at the combine he's already in the long-term plans. So they have
Right.
no interest in trading him away or not negotiating a long-term deal. We will
Right.
like for the Bengals to get out in front of this, but with the TV deals, the Bengals are eye-popping, one of the better teams in the league that you want to put on primetime television. They got to get their just due. So Jamar Chase is a part of that. People want to watch him and Joe Burrow play. So it's only fair that he gets that contract, whether if it's him matching Justin Jefferson or he goes above Justin Jefferson or whatever the case it may be. That all that remains to be seen. But
Yeah.
I think that we all know he's going to get the bag, and no, he shouldn't take a team-friendly deal just because we want to keep building Super Bowl championship teams around
Look,
him. Because some of the best teams know how to overcome that. Okay. I hate to keep using this team as an example for this magnitude, but the Kansas City Chiefs literally traded away Tyreek Hill. They had to retool their whole entire defense. And the only three guys that their core guys that they gave the bag to was Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelsey, and Chris
it's
Jones.
Jones. Yep.
Okay, they paid contracts to
Yeah.
like guys like Joe Tooney and stuff like that already, but
Yeah.
those were the three guys that got the bag.
Mhm.
Okay, and yet
Well,
everybody else was replaceable. Go ahead, Tim.
yeah. Well, you know what the thing is with the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't care what anybody says about Travis Kelsey. He is a future Hall of Famer. He is
Absolutely.
he is Patrick Mahomes' number one wide receiver. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care. I don't care what anybody says. Travis Kelsey is a tight end, but he's Patrick Mahomes' number one wide receiver.
Facts.
So, you know, why would the Chiefs pay a number one wide receiver, we'll say, i.e., Tyreek Hill, a bag, and have to pay Travis Kelce the bag when we already know who he's throwing the ball to if Travis Kelce is open, which is
Absolutely.
Travis Kelce. So,
Travis
just like,
Kelce is.
go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead. No, no, you finish. You finish. You finish.
You know,
Land your plane first.
so just like, for instance, like for us, Jamar Chase, he's Joe Burrow's number one weapon. And then whoever else is open after that, we just drafted Burton, as Austin said in the comments. So we drafted Burton. Don't forget we have Yoshi, we have Charlie Jones, we got Gasecki, we got 3 tight ends, we got actually 4 other tight ends. So I think the Bengals are preparing for when T. Higgins leaves. So I think we're in a good spot. I like I said last week, I believe that this team is better than it was last year.
Absolutely.
Not
I
not
truly
just
agree with you.
because and not just because Joe Burrow's, coming back and all that stuff. No, no, no. I'm talking about I think they're better this year than they were last year.
I think that there were some warts that peeled, if you peeled behind the wall, you would have seen some wet spots, like some mildew spots between that, because Joe Burrow was really covering the warts and the problems on his team. It got magnified quite a bit with his ankle injury. I'm sorry, his calf injury to start the season. And then
Right.
you saw it magnify a little bit more again of how bad the defense really was and other parts of the team that wasn't all that up to the standard after he was gone. Now, don't get me wrong, the coaching team, the coaching staff, they prepared well on offense to help Jake Browning kind of get some of those wins. So that way we're not just tanking and finishing at the bottom of the barrel. And I'm very happy that we did that. However, it still definitely just showed that the holes that was kind of there that Joe Burrow really covered up that we didn't really pay attention to when he was playing for real. So I
Mhm.
do agree with you 100% there. I think that personally, what you're going to see out of this upcoming team, and we're going to have plenty of time to discuss about this upcoming 2024 season. But my early sights are, I think what you were supposed to get with last year's team to be like to steamroll right into the one of the best teams, unquestioned best team in the AFC and the NFL in general. I think you're
Yeah.
going to see that this upcoming season. But before we get into that, because we got the fun part of the segment. Well, first and foremost, we are going to take a quick 30-second break. And when we get back, Tim and I, we're going to share our top 5 Bengals teams of all time. We'll be right back. All right, all right, all right. Thank you so much for bearing with us as we were going through that brief break-in period right there. So we are back, joining you live once again, running through the jungle. Please like and subscribe this episode. We've been having fun. We've
Yeah.
we've talked load management for Burrow. We've talked about Justin Jefferson breaking the bank. We talked about Jamar Chase and his potential future deal. We ain't talking about numbers or specifics, so to speak. We're going to leave that. I will say this though before we get into our next and final subject matter of the evening. Jamar Chase already illustrated that he want a lot of that money up front. Like upfront guaranteed cash is important to him. He's already
Mhm.
illustrated that in the locker room when it was like a post game after or something like that, and they talked about like, hey, you look like you'll be eligible for this extension. So what are you thinking? He kind of spilled the beans a little bit there. So I'll just say that.
Yeah.
So be looking for guaranteed cash up front for that deal too.
Oh,
A lot
of
like how
course.
they did Orlando Brown Jr. I think Jamar Chase is going to get the same thing. So
Yeah.
but again, thank you so much for joining us, guys. For those that are in our live section, thank you so much for commenting and keeping us entertained. We've been reading all your comments as we're going through the show. You guys are awesome. You guys are awesome. You're bringing in some great points. Obviously, we can't bring up every comment on the screen, but it is worth keeping the eye out on, especially when we want to highlight something. So, Austin's art, you still our guy. I see you still chiming in, Ken. You're still commenting in. Love you guys, man, and we appreciate you. But now, here's the fun part of the conversation that Tim and I are going to bring to the table here. We're going to talk about our top 5 Bengals players. I'm sorry, Bengals teams, overall teams of all time. Okay.
Mhm.
And if you're in the comment section, if you're joining our live, please feel free to chime in as we go through our list and we talk about these teams. If
Yeah.
there's a team that you wanted to highlight more specifically, like a team that nobody's really thinking about, but it's one of your favorite teams, throw it right
Hmm.
there in the comment section. We'll bring it up if it's worthy of to bring up, or if we haven't already talked about it. We'll do
Yeah.
that. We'll pay all respects for you. But Tim, I'm going to toss it over to you. Please let me hear your top 5 Bengals teams of all time.
Well, one thing I want to let you guys know is there's an age difference between Justin and I.
Yes,
And Brandon and I are the same age. Justin, how old are you?
I'm 32.
32. So there's about 16 years difference. So a little bit of age gap. And so my list is going to kind of probably be similar to Justin's, but it's going to have some other teams on it because I grew up watching the Bengals in the 70s. So um, my top five teams, I'm going to go by 5-1. I'm going to start with number 5. Number 5 is the 2005 team. They are 11-5. We went to the wild card game and we lost against the Steelers. They had Carson Palmer, Ocho, Rudy Johnson, TJ Hushmanzada, Delta O'Neal. But the one thing that excited me about this team, believe it or not, Delta, Delta O'Neal had 10 picks that year. And the Bengals team, the overall Bengals team, had 31 picks in 2005. There were
Sure.
31 interceptions by the 2005 Cincinnati Bengals team. So that is my 5 team. My number 4 team is the 2015 Cincinnati Bengals, with Andy Dalton, Hill, Bernard, Sanu, Green, Eifert, Marvin Jones, oh my gosh, Nelson, I think Atkins, uh, Iloka, Leon Hall, those guys. It was a great team. It was something that for Marvin Lewis for one of his teams, just to after the whole Carson Palmer thing, to be able to make the playoffs and have. I think they had a 12-4 season that year. I think that's what it was. But then we lost to the freaking Steelers again, and that was that perfect hit and all that mess, and it
Jeremy Hill
was
fumble. Yeah,
Jeremy
it
Hill
was
fumble.
painful.
It was awful. Well, we're not going to relive that, anyways. So that was my fourth. That's my fourth team. My third team. So my 1 through 3 teams. Now you guys got to understand here. There's a reason why I ranked these teams 1 to 3. And I'm sorry if you guys hear helicopters or airplanes above me. I live right next to an airfield, so they might be doing some practices. So I apologize if you hear helicopters. But my top 3 teams is my third ranked team is the 2021 Super Bowl team. Joe Burrow comes back from his ACL injury, and I think he also had the appendectomy that year too. So he comes back. We go to the Super Bowl. We beat we beat the Chiefs. It was a great year. It was exciting. We haven't been to a Super Bowl for I'm sorry. We didn't win a playoff game for 30 years, and we actually won a playoff game.
31 years.
31 years. Okay. Well, yeah, okay, 31 years. So that was my third team. And the only reason why there are 3 is because my number 1 and number 2 teams are just the all-time Cincinnati Bengals teams. Number 2 for me is a 1981 Super Bowl team, and we lost against the greatest quarterback of all time, Joe Montana and the 49ers. It was a great game. Ken Anderson, Archie Griffin from OSU, Pete Johnson, Collinsworth, um, Dan Ross, Ken Riley, Reggie Williams. Greats. Anthony Munoz, Crumrine. I'm sorry, I don't think Crumrine was there yet. I can't remember, but 1981 team. I got to have them to be second. But I was kind of like going, should they be 1 or should they be 2? So, but my number 1 team is the 1988 Super Bowl team. Again, Cincinnati goes and plays the greatest quarterback of all time, Joe Montana, and we get beat by by the 49ers again, and Joe Montana. You know, we had Boomer Esiason, Icky Woods, James Brooks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh, James Brooks had, or the whole team that year, believe it or not, had over 2,700 yards rushing as a team that year. So that is my biggest reasons why they're number one. Because as
Okay.
a team,
Yeah.
they had 2,700 yards rushing, which is just unbelievable. Eddie Brown, McGee, Collinsworth, Crumrine, David Fulcher, Munoz. You know, it was a great team. You know, unfortunately, like I said, we had to meet Joe, and Joe Montana decided to, hype up his game that year, and
Mm-hmm.
and beat us in the end. So those are my top five teams. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and let's see what Justin has to say next.
I really just kind of just brought me back to some nostalgia because even though I was not around for the 88 and the 81 Super Bowl, it
Yeah.
was always still pleasure to listen to what it was like here in Cincinnati during that time. More specifically, the 88 team. Like it was like a freaking concert every game from when people that was there that witnessed it live in person. Yeah, I can read it and listen to the history of the Bengals and the NFL. I can recall history stats like it's nothing from the 70s if I wanted to, but I wasn't there. There's just something about being there in real time that really kind of gives you a certain feeling level that is just not explainable. And that's where I always enjoy listening to people that talk about our old successful Bengals teams, of teams that I was not there to be the witness because I wasn't born yet. I wasn't even thought of yet. So by my parents, whatever. So, but here's my top five list. And a lot of these are consensus opinions, but some of them probably may be a little controversial. I noticed that, like you said, you had the '05 Bengals at your number five spot. I had
Hmm.
the '05 Bengals team as my number three team, actually.
Okay.
Actually, I take that back. Number four. I'm sorry. Correction. My number four slot. Okay.
Hmm.
You had the 21 Bengals as your number three team. I
Hmm.
actually had the 21 Bengals as my number one team. Spoiler
And,
alert. Well, just
and
because
yeah,
the 21 team was the team that I witnessed real time, like all of us have, that just made you feel like, oh my goodness, we're going to be special. Like this is special what we're witnessing. So, but here's rounds up the rest of my top five. So surprisingly, people left this team off and didn't even think about this team a lot, but it's kind of one of my personal favorite teams. And it was the 2013 Cincinnati Bengals. And like I said, in '04, number four, it was the '05 Bengals. Number three was the 2015 Bengals, as we already highlighted. They're kind of neck and neck.
hmm
Number two is the 22 Bengals. I know you haven't had them in your top five list, but I'm sure you probably wanted to wedge them in there somehow. But
yeah.
again, this is your favorite slash best team. So something things they got to make the cut just because majority of the consensus opinion doesn't make the cut. But to me, the 22 team, that was number two for me. And then, like I already said, the 21 team is my number one Bengals team
Yeah.
of all time favorites. So let's talk about this. So you mentioned the '05 Bengals. You already gave your synopsis on that as your number five team. I want to kind of go over that real quick too, because I already know. I can already hear it. And everybody's going to say, oh man, if Carson Palmer didn't get hurt, that Kimo von Oberhoffen knee injury didn't
Hmm.
happen, we was going to go all the way. That was our Super Bowl year. That's what you hear all the time. I've heard it my
Yeah.
whole life. And quite frankly, I believed it too until I let reality set in a little bit more. Here's the facts. Outside of the AFC North, the Steelers, the Ravens, and the Browns, obviously. The Browns
Hmm.
wasn't even that good that year. Baltimore finished 4-12 with Kyle Bowler at quarterback. They
Yeah.
took a step back from they had a pretty good '03 season, but in 2004, they kind of like was teeing on the brink of that, yeah, this might need to be a rebuild. And then in '05, they were just not good. They finished last place. The real true competition was Pittsburgh with rookie Big Ben. They were 15-1 the previous year in 2004. Everybody thought that they should have went to the Super Bowl with that record. They lost in the AFC Championship game in New England. So that was your real stiffest competition, and you split with them during the regular season. They beat you in Paul Brown Stadium, and then you beat them in what was previously known as Heinz Field.
Hmm.
But outside of the AFC North, who did the Bengals beat that year that had any substance to their name? Now, recall this. They played the AFC South that year. The two teams that had any promise was the '05 Indianapolis Colts with Peyton Manning, high flying offense, and the Jacksonville Jaguars starting Byron Leftwich. They went 12-4 that year. The Bengals lost both of those games.
Mm-hmm.
The NFC, they did play Brett Favre and beat him. The Packers were, I think, what, 5-11 that year? They were a bad team. The Minnesota Vikings were not great with Javaris Jackson. The Chicago Bears was a pretty good team. They actually beat the crap out of them in Detroit. But outside of that, there really wasn't a lot of teams that you can say that, oh my goodness, the Bengals just they are that it was unquestioned the Super Bowl pick. And they lost to the Chiefs that year and the Buffalo Bills that year, and both teams weren't really all that good, in my opinion, that season,
Right.
especially the Bills. But we hyped this 2005 team like this was the greatest team of all time when you ask a lot of Bengals play. I think what it is because it was like this for me. And I know you're older, Tim, but how it was for me, I was 14 years old watching the '05 team. It was
Mm-hmm.
during my freshman year in high school. I remember that was the year that it really kind of brought the new wave of Bengals fans. It was
Yeah.
like it was cool to be a Bengals fan during that time. Now it's like but gone was the '90s. Those time doesn't exist no more. The
Mm-hmm.
2002 team that finished 2-14 that led us to getting Carson Palmer with the number one overall pick. We wasn't talking about that team no more. This '05 team, it was the culture. It embraced the newfound culture with the Bengals fans, and we appreciated that. I think that's why it was number one that is it's on a lot of people's top list of their all five Bengals greatest teams of all time.
Yeah.
But also, it was one of the best. Now, if you were to say which of these teams had the greatest offense of all time, it is unquestionably to me the '05 Bengals. It is. And of all the Bengals teams, no one there's teams that come close and you can rival with them, but the '05 team really paved the way during that time and trailblazed for the Bengals team that we see nowadays. It was that '05 offense. But the team overall wasn't always the greatest. The defense that you mentioned had a ton of interceptions. Delta
Mm-hmm.
O'Neal, you said had 10 picks, right?
Yep.
But the defense also let up a ton of big plays. They were very opportunistic of getting turnovers at the right
Mm-hmm.
spots. But outside of Delta O'Neal, you had bright spot with Odell Thurman. Justin Smith was on that team.
Yep.
The the rest of the defense was really getting gashed quite a bit. I hate to admit it. That was the truth. And they couldn't stop those true offenses that you wanted to them to see them up against when it came playoff time. So this leads to my final assumption of what I think would have happened during the '05 season. I do believe that the Bengals would have beaten Pittsburgh at home. I do. But on that seeding that year follows as the Bengals had the number 3 seed. The Denver Broncos had the number 2 seed, and the Indianapolis Colts had the number 1 seed. The Patriots had the number 4 seed. Jacksonville and Pittsburgh had the 5 and 6 seed that year. Jacksonville went on to New England and lost that game. They didn't even compete. It wasn't even close. Pittsburgh
Yeah.
beat us, as we already know. But I think that the Bengals would have beaten Pittsburgh, but it would have set up a road trip to go beat the Denver Broncos, to go play the Denver Broncos in Mile High Stadium against that Jake Plummer-led team, Champ Bailey versus Chad in Mile High Stadium. That was going to be a battle. I mean,
Yeah. Oh
it
yeah.
was going to be tough.
Definitely. Anytime you got to play against Champ Bailey, it's going to be a tough game.
And the crazy part about it is it wasn't just Champ Bailey. It was John Lynch. He was a ferocious safety, just smacking people over that team. Now, remember, we lost Chris Henry the minute after Carson went down with injury. Chris Henry was done for the rest of the game, too. So even
Yeah.
if we would have gotten past Pittsburgh that round 1, we wouldn't have had Chris Henry round 2 for that game.
No.
It would have just been the Chad and TJ show. They would have isolated coverage, single coverage with Champ on Chad. Now, Chad had his game moments against Champ before in the past, but he also got locked up against him too.
Yep.
And I don't know how this offense would have fared against that defense that year. But let's say that they did happen to get past them. Do you believe that the Bengals would have had a chance to really go to Indianapolis and beat Peyton Manning? Because remember, Manning versus Brady was going to be the second round if that would have came to fruition.
Right.
Manning ended up losing to the Colts, but they would have that time the '06 AFC Championship game would have been that would have been the site of the '05 divisional playoff game in Indianapolis.
Well, the '05 year is the year that the Pittsburgh went to the Super
Super
Bowl and
Bowl, yeah,
played against the Seahawks, right?
correct, right.
Yeah. Okay. So I think, uh, this is all what ifs, and we go back to the future and all that stuff. If the Bengals and Carson Palmer were healthy when we played Pittsburgh and we beat Pittsburgh, there could have been a chance that we could have went to the Super Bowl. If Pittsburgh
Hmm.
could beat the Colts or the Broncos, or I can't remember who they played throughout the playoffs besides the Bengals. That was it. And then I
Yeah, they
know they
played
went on.
the Colts and the Broncos. Yeah, though they played
Okay,
those exact teams.
so they went on and they beat the Colts or the Broncos, and then the Colts, wasn't it? The AFC championship game was against the Colts, or was
That
that
was
against the
against Denver.
Broncos? That was
That
against
was
Broncos.
against Denver.
Okay, the Broncos. So if we could have beaten them, we could have went to the Super Bowl. I believe if Pittsburgh could beat them with Ben, we could have beat them with Carson Palmer, and I think it would have been a different thing. But unfortunately, it didn't work out. Carson got
Yeah,
hurt. Yeah.
and my overall thinking is, while I understand that trade line of thinking that the Bengals could have went to the Super Bowl, I wouldn't guarantee like that was going to be our year. I'm not going to be one. I had to relax my tone of thinking that,
Mm-hmm,
because the reason why I didn't think that way, because I was looking at the league as a whole that season.
mm-hmm.
That should have really been the year that Peyton Manning won his first ring. I'm gonna be
Yeah,
perfectly honest.
yeah.
They started out 13-0 that year. They went through the Bengals. They beat us here. That was one of the most fun to watch games I've ever watched during that
Mm-hmm,
'05 season. Oh my gosh, Manning, Palmer just duking it out here in the stadium. Chad going for 8 catches, 160 something yards, and a touchdown. Man, that was a fun to watch game. Man, it was just like high flying action back and forth. We lost, but it made you really feel good. Like, man, we can hang with these guys. Yeah, you know what I mean? So we see them in the playoffs, man. We can't wait for round two of this.
yeah,
But round two would have been in Indianapolis because, again, Indianapolis, they had their own struggles too. Peyton Manning, for some reason, he just couldn't get it done in the second round of the playoffs. He was always 0, I think career wise in his Colts tenure, 0-3 when he had a bye, I believe, until 2009. I think that's when he broke the streak with that first round bye that year. But he never won that first round after having a bye, the first round bye. He never won that game. He was 0-3 prior to that. So
mm-hmm.
he had his own hurdles to go overcome that season. But also remember this about that Colts team. They finally beat Tom Brady during the regular season out of the Manning Brady. That was Manning's first win ever against that season. I just actually watched that game a couple nights ago just because I wanted to kind of reminisce. I remember watching that. I was thinking like, man, why was Peyton Manning ever struggling against this team? Yeah, so I was doing that. So when I go back to how this relates to that '05 team, and I know we're spending a ton of time on the '05 Bengals because that's one of the most iconic Bengals teams of all time. I do recognize that. I don't have them as high on my top 5 favorite Bengals all time list, but they are still one of my favorite teams that I've ever watched. So,
Yeah,
and there's going to
which is
be more to
understandable.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I come back to just going with this line of thinking is that I think that the Bengals would have won that first playoff game against Pittsburgh. And I think that we would have set ourselves up with a lot of hype the next round going at Denver, and probably came home disappointed with a slight loss, with the narrow loss, maybe. That's how
Maybe.
I would have seen that playoff run. But it still would have set up for a hopeful future because
Mm-hmm.
we got that playoff monkey off our back. We oh man, we can't wait to get back in the day. We would have been more excited like we were going into the '06 year. So
Yeah.
that's what I feel like what would have happened. And I also think that the level of cutting edge mental toughness and that you supposed to play with as a quarterback, I don't think that that was in Carson Palmer like people think that people thought it was. More
Yeah.
so like you see it in Joe Burrow. It was not in Carson like that for real.
No, Carson, to be honest with everybody, I was never a real big Carson Palmer fan. One, because he played for USC. I'm a Notre Dame fan. I wasn't a fan of
Mhm.
Carson Palmer. So, but when we drafted him, he had a good year in 2005. I'm just not a big Carson Palmer fan, but I do see the excitement, for 14-year-old Justin Lacey, 14-year-old for our 2021 team probably started the same thing for them. Think about it, that
Mhm.
14-year-old in 2021, the Cincinnati Bengals started that fire for them as well. So, I can see that, I understand that. And for me as a Bengals fan for all these years, 2005 was like, it was exciting. I was like, okay, here we go. Then Palmer went down. We got beat by the Steelers. Steelers charged and went to the Super Bowl and beat Seattle. But and like I said, I'm happy in 2005, Justin, that 14-year-old boy was excited to see Cincinnati, and I hope in 2021 that 14-year-old boy somewhere sitting in Cincinnati or Dayton, Ohio, or Lima, Ohio, or wherever in Ohio says, you know what, this team is so exciting to watch. I want to be a Bengals fan, and I want to watch and dedicate my time to them when football season comes.
I actually agree. I want to point at something that Ken just made a comment here, and it kind of illustrates that what you just stated about Carson. West
Yeah.
Coast quarterbacks has never really worked out for us. Just like those gunslinging quarterbacks that ran a specific style of high flying offense in college never worked out for us. You think of guys like David Klinger, those guys never worked out for the Bengals in that way. Now, Carson Palmer, he was talented. He was immensely talented
He
physically,
was. He
but
was.
he never elevated the team to a certain level. I mean, he elevated the team to a certain extent, but he never elevated like the branding of the Bengals, like what we know, like what Joe Burrow is doing. I keep going
Yeah.
back to Burrow, like what Tom Brady did, like what
Mhm.
Peyton Manning did. Because for a brief stretch, a period of time from like 05 to 07, Carson Palmer was getting talked about in the same light as those guys. He was getting talked about as like there's Manning, there's Brady, and then there's Palmer. People were saying that during that in real time, and I was eating that up because I was like, yes, we got one of those guys. And
Yeah.
but the reality was he never was better than guys like Drew Brees. The
Mhm.
guy in his own division that he ended up playing against, Ben Roethlisberger, outplayed him.
Mhm.
Joe Flacco even outplayed him,
Yep.
even though I still would take Palmer over Flacco all day, every day. But that was the fact. That was the reality.
Mhm.
And it just basically just comes down to think that maybe Carson just wasn't as cold as we all thought that he was, but he was still a talented quarterback that was able to sling the rock all over the place. But
Yeah.
that's my only Carson Palmer led team in the top five because there
Yeah.
was no other iconic teams. You can I didn't honorable mention the '09 team, but that they didn't make my list as a top five team. But I
Yeah.
do want to point out the 2015 team because that's the next team that has getting a lot of controversy. Now there was some little bit of debate on social media, and I hate going to social media, but this was a fun debate. Which one would you pick, the 2015 team or the '05 team? I'll go brief. I picked the 2015. And the reason why I went with that team is, well, simple. The overall roster was better. Defense, offense, you name it, the Bengals had it. You talk about the high flying passing attack with Carson and Chad Johnson. Well, I can see that and raise you with Andy Dalton playing at an MVP level with AJ Green as an All Pro level. Still, I see that you're talking about TJ Hushmanzada and Chris Henry. Well, I also got Marvin Jones who was eating guys up, and you still got Muhammad
Yes,
Sanu
I
who
knew.
didn't. Muhammad Sanu didn't catch a touchdown, but he ran for
Right.
one. He was a gadget guy. He was
Mhm.
killing it, and then the tight end threat, the presence of Tyler Eifert as a tight end threat was just the number one selling point. And our running game was, I would say that it was about the same. Rudy Johnson was a better overall running back, efficient
Yeah.
running back. But 2015, you had the combo of Jeremy Hill playing better, and you had Giovanni Bernard.
Mhm.
So I still would overall the synopsis of what I look at the 2015 offense was right on par with the '05 team. But the defense is what separated. That pass
Yeah.
rush was relentless.
Mhm.
No one. I felt like when we was watching those Bengals teams in 2015, during that 2011, 2015 run, I finally felt like the Bengals were really geared playing towards AFC North football, like we was always meant to. We beat
Yeah.
everybody in that division. We
Yep.
started out 8-0, beat guys like Pittsburgh on the road in their house,
Seahawks. We beat the
and
Seahawks that year.
beat the Legion of Boom Seahawks.
Yep.
That was the first game that told everybody something.
Mhm.
And then you ended up having the unfortunate injury to the Dalton's thumb.
Dalton.
I don't know, and that's the thing. I mentioned mental toughness. I don't know if Dalton was to have been the right quarterback to get us over those humps, but I do believe the core essence of the team would have been able to been enough to maybe have got you to the Super Bowl that year. And the reason why I say that is because if you look back on the overall league as a whole, the Patriots really weren't that good. They were in the AFC Championship game that year. The Denver
Yeah.
Broncos was playing with Peyton Manning, who was a shell of himself. They were not really as good as they all think that they were. They ended up winning the Super Bowl. You were better than both of those teams, and you should have been the number one seed. but you weren't. And unfortunately, you were 12-4, but I felt like the Bengals easily could have been 14-2 that season. What say you?
I had the 2015 team as my fourth ranked team. So, so I had them over the 2005 team. I agree with you. Our offense was good, our defense was good. We had plenty of tools, and we had, some unfortunate situations that happened with Perfect and, and all that stuff. But it was a good team. But when Dalton went down, and it was just like, oh no, can AJ McCarron come in there? Because I've never thought Andy Dalton as a field general. That's what I call
Right,
Patrick
right.
Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. Those guys are field generals. They're field generals.
Hmm.
They're the captains of the team. They're I've never thought of Andy Dalton as that field general. He was
Right.
more of a, I don't know. People are gonna like, Tim, shut the hell
You
up when I
gotta be
say this.
you gotta be perfect. You gotta be
He was
perfect every
more
time you
he
have Andy Dalton.
Yeah, for Andy Dalton, he was more of a game manager, situational quarterback. He wasn't a Ben Roethlisberger in 2015 where, you gave Ben the ball with 30 seconds left in the game and they're down by 4 points. You might as well just kiss that goodbye because Ben was going to march down the field and score on you. With Andy Dalton, we had our game winning drives with Andy Dalton and everything, but was he somebody that you could actually depend on with 30 seconds left and, down 4 points in the game? For me, it wasn't. But I did love Andy Dalton. He was a good quarterback. I'm not gonna say he was a great quarterback, but he was a good Cincinnati Bengals quarterback.
It was
What he
good,
did,
yeah.
what he did for Cincinnati and Buffalo, Buffalo loved him as well. I loved Andy Dalton. Don't ever get that wrong. Um, but I don't think we would have been able to, even if Dalton was to stay healthy, we might have ended up 12-4 still. We might have ended up 13-3. But that AFC North football, we see it every damn year. It's AFC North football.
Mhm.
It's bloody nose football. And the Steelers, they were pretty damn good in 2015. Believe it or not, they had a pretty damn good
They
team.
were.
They had a pretty damn
And
good team. So
and also too, I'm gonna be honest here. If Big Ben didn't get hurt earlier that year, they may have would have beaten us and gave us our first loss that season.
true,
But Big Ben
true.
got hurt. He came back to play in the game against us. That was his first game back. But
Yep.
overall, I still thought that the Bengals were ready to play against any AFC North team. Like Pittsburgh was our number one hurdle, just like the '05
Yeah.
team. It was
Yep.
always Pittsburgh that got in our heads. It was never Baltimore. It was never Cleveland. It was always the Steelers, the team that always did. You just want to drive off the cliff every time you lose to that team. But that 2015 team teased a lot of us that made you think that Dalton was the guy that we all wanted him to be, as we said that his deficiencies were now. But during that 2015 time, there was that Dalton prime meridian. He was on that prime meridian quarterback to where if you had a guy better than him, you had a franchise guy. If you had a guy worse than him, you don't. You need to probably look to upgrade. But what if you
Right.
just have Dalton? And we thought in 2015 that Dalton shredded that meridian line and became one of the franchise guys.
He
He
did.
was leading to last minute comebacks, like against we talked about the Seahawks already, but week 3 against the Ravens on the road, that Joe Flacco and Andy Dalton duel was really good.
Hmm.
And Dalton ended up scoring the last TD and then just pushing, throwing like 2 touchdowns. That 80-yard catch and run that he threw to AJ Green will always live in infamy in Bengals
Oh,
fans' minds
yeah.
because it was one of the telltale signs. It's like, oh yeah, y'all ain't got us now, right?
Hmm.
it felt great. That's why I always will appreciate the 2015 team more than the '05 team. But before we let this go off the wind and we start talking about this, because we can go on, I know, all day with these teams,
We
believe it
could.
or not.
Yeah,
We can go for like
definitely.
2 hours. But we are getting ready to approach the hour mark. And I do want to run by this real quick here because we haven't talked about the most famous team and the most recognized team in recent Bengals memory. Again, I already paid homage to the '88 team, so we're not going into that. But it is the 21 Bengals squad.
Yeah.
And honorable mention the 22 Bengals team because 22 was my 1 and 2. I had a tough time interchanging those two teams between 1 and 2, even though if you flip flop them, I don't care because the 22 team was better than 21. I'll say that. They were more dominant. They
Yeah.
felt like that they had arrived in a sense. The 21 team, if you gave me the definition of the greatest upstart team in NFL history, you can make an argument for the 2021 Bengals team. You
Mm-hmm.
really can. Over teams like the 81 49ers, over teams like the 2001 New England Patriots, over teams like, let's see, what else was another upstart team? The 92 Cowboys, or the 90, actually, I'm sorry, the 91 Cowboys. But in 2021, I felt like, man, there was just something, and we're still feeling it now. There's just something special about Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
And this is not going to be a whole Joe Burrow post. We did not see that Super Bowl run coming, but the way that they boat raced through the AFC North, Joe Burrow single-handedly took the division and flipped it on its head by himself with the addition of Jamar Chase.
Mm-hmm.
Why the Sewell versus Chase debate was so polarizing, because it basically led to everything that we've witnessed in 21 during the season. It all started with that move, number one, in the draft.
Yeah.
Obviously the supplemental free agency acquisitions and stuff like that we made, but it started with getting Joe Burrow back from this torn ACL,
Mm-hmm.
and it allowed us to draft an explosive player like Jamar, and that was the new core of what you see nowadays. And while we're talking so much about Justin Jefferson and how that's going to affect Jamar and his contract, while we're so overly amplified and illustrated with everything that Joe Burrow does and how it just is scrutinized, he can, like I said, he can drop a pen in the wrong way, and we're already talking about it. So it all leads back to the 21 Bengals. It was just something special about Burrow, and he's going to continue to show that. The signature moment, obviously, is beating Kansas City to win the AFC North in week 17 that year, and the way he did it, both
Yeah.
times beating them. We were down so much, and you came back and was like, "We can beat y'all too." And I always thought before then that the Bengals were always set up to be the perfect kryptonite for that team. Nobody else didn't believe me when I said that at that time. But I had to see it in order to validate it. And sure enough, it was validated. And he
Mm-hmm.
validated it again in the playoffs. And then in 22, when the Bengals arrived and was just one of the most dominant teams that I've ever
Yeah.
seen,
Yeah.
they showed that they were legit better right then
Oh
and
yeah.
there. And that there was no fear. And even to this day, while Kansas City is sitting there on the mountaintop with 3 championships, they know a ring is coming in Cincy. So I'm speaking highly about that. But I'll end my rant on that note, and I'll listen to you before we close it up.
The 21 team, it was great. The 22 team was great. If I remember correctly, the 22 team was top 10 in defense. We actually had a great defense that year. And unfortunately, we came up short against Kansas City in the AFC Championship game in 2022. Um, but like I said before, and I'm not going to go on about this 2021 or 2022 team because we all know how great they are. But I still believe that this 2024 team is better than the 2023 team. And, let's just keep our prayers, our positive thoughts towards the team and Joe Burrow, and they all stay healthy, and we have a great season, and we kick some AFC North butt, and show them who the real bosses are. That's I just don't. After that record against the AFC North last year, I want to see that
Sickening.
change. It was It was just
Mm-hmm.
makes me want to vomit in my mouth because you all know, if you're a Cincinnati Bengals fan, you all know how toxic the Ravens, the Browns, and the Steelers fans are. They will, Steelers fans will tell you about the Super Bowls they won, back in the past, that they have so many Super Bowls, and, the Ravens and their 2-time MVP Lamar Jackson, and, and all this stuff. And the Browns, they just kind of make up stuff, but that's besides the point. But it's AFC North football. It's tough football, and I'm excited to see more football. I about cussed right there. Oops.
I know. I
I'm
heard it.
excited. I'm just excited for this 2024 season. I'm knocking on wood that Joe Burrow stays healthy and we have a hell of a year.
Man, this was very fun. I
Yeah.
This is not going to be the last time that we do a top 5 Bengals list of all time, because there's going to be future editions of teams that add, and then we might change our minds about like takes that I've made about, let's say, like the 2013 team. It might not even be on my list next year or sometime around, because I've probably came to new light or something about another team that I wanted to pay a little bit more mentioning to or whatnot. So
Mm-hmm.
there's just so much. There's just so much to dissect when it comes to ranking best teams of all time, and it is fun. It makes for fun conversations. And I am firmly believe, like you are, that I believe that this upcoming season is going to be one of those teams that we are going to want to rank as a top 5 team of all time as well, too, upcoming. Again, I know it's wishful thinking, but when you got a guy like Joe Burrow, anything is possible. He
Yeah.
almost basically drugged this team that was very flawed last year into the playoffs and to a Super Bowl. And we believed that we could have went to a Super Bowl because we had that guy. So with that being said, opportunities are the sky is the limit when you got that guy at quarterback, I should say.
Mhm.
So I am obviously looking forward to this upcoming season. It's we're roster constructing. Again, we don't want to speculate injuries and stuff like that for the time being. We don't want to make assumptions of, oh, we should be able to do this, but we're talking confidently, like we know what this Bengals team is capable of. We know what kind of guys we have on this football team. So let's just go out there and just prove it and then just shut these naysayers up. So I'm ready for it. I know you're ready for it. And our listeners that's out here listening, whether if you're listening with us on the live stream today or you're going to tune in later on when the audio version drops on podcasts, you'll listen to it now. And I know you're going to be amped up for the season to start. But however, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. This was a
Yes.
very fun episode. This was the fun part of the episode that I was building up this whole entire time. And I'm glad you guys got a chance to listen to us talk about and pay homage to all of our good teams so far. There's going to be more additions in years to come as we continue these type of conversations. But I don't want to keep you guys too long because we are well overdue. But any final words, Tim? Parting shots before we head out of here.
I'm just going to be quick. Thank you guys again for joining us. We appreciate all your support, all your comments. Like, subscribe. Make sure you hit that alert button so you're alerted
Mhm.
when we go live. We're trying to build this thing up, like Brandon says over and over again, and we do appreciate every single one of you guys. We appreciate you guys because we're just a little Bengals podcast that we're trying to grow, and we're doing our best we can do, and it's been fun, and I appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Tim. And a couple of more comments here from Ken and Austin's Art. We appreciate you guys for joining in today. So, who
Yes,
day
thank
and
you.
have a good one.